my tarot friends, Justin Michael. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome, of course, if it's your first time visiting. I appreciate you stopping by as always. I'm going to attempt to make a video that I'm not really accustomed to making, which is a how-to video. It takes a bit of organization and maybe a little more patience to do these kind of videos, which is why this took me so long to make. Also, I don't have as much time as I used to have because of my new job and so forth, but I'm going to attempt to show you how I make my tarot boxes. So it's a simple two-part box design. The lid is not covered yet. We're going to cover that here today, but I have a finished bottom, and I'm going to walk you through the process of making this box. And it's really simple. It's really not difficult. The top is made exactly the same as the bottom. It's just slightly larger so that it fits on there. So obviously you want to start with the base first. So, I'm actually making another lid, but it doesn't really matter. It's the same principle. I like this box because it's a very solid design. Structurally, it almost feels like wood. You could throw this in a bag. It sits flush on there. I mean, it's really a nice box. It's tried and true. And I have quite a few decks in these boxes already. Plus, it's a very easy kind of box to make. It's just really simple. And it's not much bigger than a tuck box, really. They stack really easily. They sit on a shelf nice. You can make them as fancy as you like using like whatever kind of paper you want to cover it with. You can use pretty much anything. And this is very customizable. You can make little changes here and there. Really, the only important thing, it doesn't matter what size, like I said, you can change it up however you want to change it, but when you're coming up with the construction of the base, the very first part which you're going to make, which is the part that the deck sits in, you're going to kind of start off with your piece of cardboard, and you're going to just determine the size of the box, and then the other pieces kind of come from that. So I'm going to get into that. The deck I'm actually making a box for today is my Centennial Rider-Waite Smith. The box is just in tatters. I need a new box, so that's what I'm going to be making a box for. As you can see, I already made the base. They sit in there really, really nicely. So let me just show you how I came up with this size. But let's talk about what you need first before I get into kind of the little details of it. So bare minimum, you're going to need a piece of cardstock. There are many different kinds of cardstock you can recycle, old sketch pads. You can use chipboard. You can use thinner, thicker. I prefer a thicker board. This is called Davy board. It's a bookbinder's board. You use it for book covers. I like to have my boxes for pretty much for life, and they are just super solid with the Davy board. But it doesn't really matter the thickness of it. In terms of cutting the board, like I'm going to talk about that. I have a rotary cutter, which makes it slightly easier, but you can use, a guillotine, and you can also cut the pieces by hand using a ruler, and just making the cuts very carefully with a utility knife and a cutting board. Just don't cut yourself. Obviously, I'm going to leave that to you in terms of cutting it. I'm going to show you just the basic principle of how you make this. The rest is really common sense. Other things you need besides obviously cardboard, and like I said, you can use recycled cardboard, whatever you want to use, but I prefer this, and it's also acid free, this book board, so it's archival, which is important for the life of whatever deck you're using. Utility knife you're going to need regardless of whether you're going to cut you're going to need some kind of a utility knife, even an X-Acto knife. If you have a rotary cutter, great, you'll cut the cardboard that way. Or with like a heavy duty guillotine, but you'll need this, especially when wrapping. But there's other parts that you need. You need glue, obviously. So this is what holds it all together. PVA glue is absolutely necessary for this project. You can order it on Amazon. You don't need like fancy PVA. I use this stuff by the gallon, and I order it from Talla's, which is a bookbinder shop. I also use Hollander's stuff, but it's the Jade 403. This is like top of the line stuff. I use it all the time for many different things. So, that's where I get it from. But I've used the stuff on Amazon. It's just as good. As long as it's acid free and PVA, like a bookbinder's PVA, look at the reviews and stuff. It's fine. The rest is kind of all improvised. You'll need a wrapping paper, obviously, whatever kind you like. I have a bone folder, which comes in handy. Obviously, rulers, things like that. But the rest is really just common sense. You will need a way to measure, to make measurements. But I even do all the measurements by eye anyway. Last thing you need, that I'm thinking of anyway. Oh, two more things. Well, first is a piece of cardstock, which is kind of the secret to holding these parts together. And then you can use felt, or you can use really anything, but something to kind of line the bottom with. I like felt. It's just really nice. It's really useful. I've used things such as leather, all sorts of things. You can improvise. You can even use paper. You don't need anything. You can just lay extra paper down there. It doesn't really matter. So let me show you how I come up with the size first of the base, and then the rest is very simple. It's all common sense, really. You're going to start off. Your Davy board's going to come in, like, I don't know, 9 by 12, or it looks similar to like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. We're going to turn it on its side here, and I'm going to make a straight cut across. And what I do is I try to get all of the pieces from this top portion here, which is usually, you can usually do it that way. Doesn't really matter though. I mean, however you want to use your common sense to come up with these pieces, but you want to come up with the size first. And I'm going to make it slightly larger than the card. So I use the card to kind of draw up, how big I want the box. Ultimately, this is going to be the base here, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut straight across here. I don't want to cut at the size that the base is going to be, because I'm going to make two cuts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add an extra kind of length on there. I don't see, this works for a rotary cutter. Obviously, use your common sense however you want to do this. But this is just the way I do, because a rotary cutter cuts pretty straight. So I would just add the width of the board, the thickness of the board times 2. I add, so that you see you have, this is going to be the size of the base, but we're going to cut it slightly larger across. And the reason I do that is because 2 of the pieces are going to be longer than the base. And that's the 2 longer side panels. So let's talk for a minute about the construction here. So the construction of the box is very simple. It's kind of, you have these 2 smaller side pieces. In my case, they are 79 millimeters long, which is the exact length of um, the base here. It's going to match the base exactly in terms of its length. But the 2 side panels are going to hug the outer pieces. So they're going to be slightly longer than the base. So you can see it is basically, it's the length of the base plus the width of the board times 2, because it's going to cover these 2 panels here. And I wanted to just kind of just make it. And what that does is it kind of holds these smaller side pieces in place so that you get a solid construction. And that's how it's going to be, like that. And that's it. So you determine the size by using the card. Once you can make it any size you want, really. The depth of the box, any size you want. You can make it higher, you can make it low. It doesn't really matter. The basic idea here, or the basic equation, is that you have these 2 side panels. First off, all these side panels are going to be the same height. Obviously, that's common sense. So you want them to be the same height this way. But in terms of length, these 2 small pieces are going to match the base exactly. And the 2 longer sides are going to be the base plus the width of the board, or the thickness of the board times 2. That's the most important thing. In my case, it's 128 millimeters long and 79 millimeters wide, and the side pieces are 133. But these 2 pieces are 79, both 79. So you can kind of see visually. So 79 millimeters across here, which is the same exact as the base. The base is 128, and the side panels are 120, or 133 rather, which is enough to cover these 2. So that's it. I mean, that's really it. It's very, very easy. So once you cut your pieces, and like I said, I'm going to leave it to you. This is just the way I do it. So if I was cutting it by hand, I would just make sure it was straight, and I would cut all the way across like this. I use a rotary cutter. It's just much easier, but you want it to be straight, right? So you cut. You might even want to cut it a little thicker than that, and then because if you make a mistake, you can go back, and then you want to cut out the base. So you're going to cut the base that way and that way, and then you're going to come up with the side panel. So if, you might want it thicker for the base. It's going to be thicker than the top. For the bottom part, it's going to be thicker than the lid. So you might want to just go there, and then use the piece that you cut to measure the next one. And you want to kind of do that. But like I said, I'm going to leave that to you. Use your good common sense to figure out how to get these pieces. But that's the basic idea. And if you just rewatch that little part, you have the secret of making these boxes. And like I said, the top is made exactly as the bottom is made. So let me show you how I put this all together, because this is important. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece of cardstock here, and I'm going to actually apply glue to my base here, the bottom part. And we're going to adhere this, and you want to go heavy on the glue on this part, because you want it to stick. You want it to be really good. When you're applying the paper at the end, you want to use the glue a little more sparingly. But it's really very easy, and this glue is really good stuff. So now I'm gonna apply this. Actually, what I do is usually this way, because I'll use the same piece of cardstock for both. For both the lid and the base. And now this is where I use my bone folder, and I just kind of rub that in. And I have a weight that I use. I want this to dry for a few minutes. I can just use the glue here, and I can walk away for 5 minutes, and let it dry. Okay, so once that sits for a bit, now I'm going to apply the small ends first, because I want them to match the baseboards exactly. So the first thing I do is I get my small glue brush. You can use whatever, but I use a small glue brush, and I glue the sides here. I just apply some glue on there. So you want glue on the cardstock, so that this bonds to both the cardstock and the side of the cardboard here. But you also want to put some glue on your piece of cardboard here too. This is like really important. This is the most important part in terms of the structure of the box. You want your box to stay together, so you got to make sure you put enough glue on here. And this is going to be covered in paper, so if you get some glue like on the outside, it doesn't really matter. But a little of this stuff goes a long way, but you want to go heavy on it a little bit. Um, you can use the longer side pieces to kind of figure out where you want that to sit, you know, to get it like nice and even. So I always use the side pieces there, and I just kind of rub that in a little bit. I'm not afraid to get glue on this part because it's going to be covered in paper. But yeah, so you want it to match exactly. Now you're going to do this a couple times before you get really good at it. Anything you do, you get better with practice. There's nothing that you can do perfectly the first time. You can't expect to. My first boxes were adequate, but they were my first boxes. And it's really fun. Once you get into this, I mean, you'll just start making boxes, and you'll enjoy the process. But don't expect to get this perfect the first time you do it. No matter what you do, you have to be willing to make mistakes, and learn from your mistakes. When you cover the paper the first time, you're going to be like, oh shit, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, and you get a little bit better as time goes on. So again, we're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to apply glue to this side. Um, and I applied it here on both the cardstock and the cardboard, and on here, and and then I'm going to put this on here. And again, I want to match it almost perfectly because I'm going to have these side panels are going to sit, and I want them to be almost perfect. Oh, just like that. Okay. And you're going to hold that in place. I just kind of test the other side too. Okay. Really, this stuff works so fast. You can hold it for a second. Okay. So now it's time to glue the side panels. And the way I'm going to do that is the same way. I'm going to run glue down here, and I'm going to put a little bit more glue. But I'm going to put glue on the side pieces here too, because that, like I said, is going to hug those two pieces. So I want to get this nice and glued up. The cardstock really holds this design together. This is what makes it possible. It's a little bit of a trick because it's hard. If you were to try to do this without the cardstock, the box would fall apart. And there are also other things you can do to kind of like reinforce this box. I don't get too crazy. Sometimes I'll put like pieces of craft paper on there on the sides, and then so now with the long end, I'm going to put glue just on the outer edge because that's where it's going to be that last like couple of millimeters that hug that you know those smaller pieces, and then I'm going to glue the bottom. Is that this side panel has to hold these other two pieces in place, and you want to pay special attention to this, like how they sit. You want to make adjustments while the glue is still wet. It's not going to be perfect. Like, once the box is done, you're going to see, um, you know, some imperfections. It doesn't have to be perfect, and that's what you get with a handmade box. It's not going to be perfect. It's not a factory box, but it's something you can be proud of because you made yourself, um, and it's really better quality. Glue, just like I did the others. I want keep in mind you want to keep this stuff. You want to make this adhere to the cardstock as well as the cardboard. Okay, so now I have my box pretty much structurally in place, and I'm going to hold that for a second the way I want it. And I'm going to show you what I do to make these boxes like perfect. I got this entire method from I believe his name is Darren at Das Bookbinding, but he gave me the idea of finding a brick and just wrapping it in paper, like just to use as a weight. So what I do is I set the brick in here, you know, to let it dry. But I get these little clamps. You can use many different kinds of clamps. A C clamp. These are the clamps that I use, and I just put them together, not like too hard because you don't want to break the box. But I just put it on the very end, and I just let this dry with that pressure on there. So it's completely solid. And that's it. That's the basis of making the box, the top and the bottom. That's it. It's ready to dry. So you see the clamps are on there. You have the brick in there, and then you're going to come back. Let this dry for a good hour. Okay, so when you come back, after you let that dry for a while, you're going to have the box is basically going to be stuck to a piece of cardstock. So it's going to look like this. So it's very easy, really. And I actually use my smaller little knife here. You just trace around the side of the box. Okay. Yeah, time to get a snap off this blade. It's a little dull. Um, but yeah, and that's going to be it. Okay, my friends, before we move on to the portion of the video where I show you how to wrap the boxes, I want to talk about how you come up with the size for the second piece that you're going to make. So the first piece you're going to make, as discussed, is the bottom portion, or the base, as I refer to it in the video. It's the portion that fits the cards, that sits at the bottom. You construct this part first. Once you come up with this, which is totally up to you how large you want it, you come up with the top size, the lid size, by using the dimensions of the finished box that you just made. So we're just going to draw a line here on the board that you're going to use, and now you know how large the box is. You're going to make the cut for the base, for the main base piece. You're going to make that cut slightly larger by just a couple of millimeters. I like to use a finished box, even wrapped in paper is even better, even though it's not going to make much of a difference to paper because it's so thin. But still, you come up with the dimensions and then you just cut it a little larger, and the equation is still the same. The only difference is that the top is going to not be as deep. You know what I mean? Because you want it to kind of sit a little high up so that you can grab it, and that's what the box is going to look like. When it's finished. But anyway, let's move on. I'm going to show you how I wrap it. Okay, so now I have a roll of paper. You can use any kind of paper you want. This happens to actually be Hallmark paper. Hallmark gift wrap paper is just kind of fancier. It has this metallic shine to it. It's like a blue metallic shine. So I'm just going to kind of go from top to bottom here. First thing you're going to want to do is just to determine how much paper you need. You can even draw the box out here just to give you an idea. And then you're going to want to flip it over like this. So that covers the outer part right there. And then you want to add another one there to compensate for the inner piece. And you want to do that on both sides. So, but I don't even go all that. I just kind of eyeball it, make sure I have enough paper, and then I just glue. So I'm going to glue this part on. Now, this is the part I was telling you. You really want to use the glue very sparingly. So I'm currently taking some glue off of this brush because this brush has been sitting in this glue for weeks. And it's really got a lot in there. But you just want to get this a little damp. You want to cover it evenly with glue, but you don't want to put a lot because the more you put, you get it really wet, you're going to have bubbles. So you just want it. You want the paper to adhere to it, but you don't want it to be um, too wet. Okay. Um, Now I mentioned earlier that there are things you can do to reinforce the sides. Sometimes I'll cut out some craft paper. You could really use anything. You can even use like book cloth, or like a piece of linen or anything, and just kind of run it along the sides to keep them together, sort of like reinforcing an old book. You can do that. It's really not necessary. If you get these to sit against there flush and almost perfectly, you won't really have to do that. And then you see I have some bubbles here, so I got to rub these bubbles out before and this is really where the bone folder comes in handy. But you will get some bubbles, air bubbles, and you just rub them out. Okay, so that's what you do first and foremost. You want to glue the first little piece to the bottom. Cuts. I like to work with the paper longer than I need to. I know some people get it like the exact length of it. I do it a little bit differently. And then, but what you want to do is you want to get a ruler, and preferably with a cork bottom so it doesn't slip. These are the best kinds. And then what I do is I actually will, I'm going to make a cut. I'm going to put the ruler against the side here. And I'm going to make a cut exactly from the box out. So it's going to cut it like that. And I'm going to do it to this side as well. And this is the tricky part, but you'll get better at this. You'll find shortcuts and so on and so forth. But you'll get a little bit better at this as you go on. And then you're going to do the same thing over here. You're going to use that ruler to mark your place, and you're going to cut from the box out. Now, for these sides, I want to give myself a little room because you're going to put these sides in first, then you're going to put the short ends in, and you want like a little bit of paper to wrap around. So I'm going to leave myself a little room here. I know that sounds confusing, but it'll make sense in a little bit. So I'm going to actually leave like a good amount of paper, and I'm going to cut from that other cut. I don't want to cut into this paper, but I'm going to cut exactly from the first cut, and I'm going to cut out. You got to give yourself a little space here because once this comes up, you're going to want to wrap that around. We're going to have to make some more cuts because, but I kind of do it as I go. So I'm going to show you what I do. You're going to have to kind of use your common sense here and just figure out what works for you. This is what works for me, and again, sparingly. So I'm gonna glue just this side here. Um, see, I already got some glue on there, but it's all over my fingers. That's why. But that comes right off with this metallic paper. It's kind of good stuff in that respect. And you really want to rub this in, get all the bubbles out. So now what I'm going to do is, once that's glued on there, what I do is I make a small cut here. I make another small cut because I want to fold this over, but I want this to be the exact width, but I leave myself a little room. So I'm just going to trim a little off. So I'm going to glue this side here, and I just do it side by side. I find it easier to just glue as I go, but this is just what works for me. So we're going to repeat the process over here. I know this is going to be redundant, so hopefully I can fast forward through some of this. There's really no easier way to do this. And I'm going to make those other cuts again to make it fit. Hopefully you can see it a little better on this side. But I don't want to cut too deep in because then you'll have bare. It's a fine line. It really is. You have to practice with it, and sometimes I do it really well, and then sometimes I'm like, okay, shit, I screwed up. But usually when I make mistakes, it's with the paper wrapping. It really is because this is the hardest part. Okay, so I'm going to apply some glue here. So now you have that there. This is the side that's, so now you see how that folds up. I'm going to have that like extra little lip there because that I'm going to eventually fold that over. hope you can see what I'm doing here, because you want to cut it kind of right at the board, but you want to leave yourself that little bit of space for the lip. Here. Easily if you get it on the outside. Now you have like these lips sticking out, which is the last bit of sealing this thing up. So you just want to use like your small brush here, or whatever method you use. I kind of brush outward like this. Looks like. So I let this dry a little bit. Now, if I was going to add felt in there, I would have cut this excess paper out, and I would have set the felt in there. In fact, I still might put felt in there. I don't know. I got to see how I feel. But, ultimately, you're going to just make sure it fits in there. Obviously, you want to let it dry before you set them together. I just wanted to see how well it fit. So that's it. The rest is just drying time. And we'll come back and see in a few minutes what it looks like. Okay, so now I'm ready to test out my box. Everything is dried up. And you can see, it's not perfect. Obviously, that's just a little bit of water or something that I got on there. I wiped it off with a cloth, but this polishes up nicely, this box. The inside, I mean, could be a little bit of tighter, but people don't actually see that part anyway, and it's really not that big of a deal. If I want to hide that, I could just put a piece of felt in there, and I could even just glue it just as it is, and it'll be fine. In fact, I probably will end up doing that just to make it look a little bit nicer. But you can see here, my deck fits perfectly in there, and this is a nice box, man. I mean, you can't, like, it's really a nice quality homemade box. You can't go wrong. If you wanted to, paste a label in there, you can do that. But I like it the way it is. And I have a lot of these I just beat up, some of them I have with writing on them. I store other supplies in like all of my mistake boxes from the beginning. I actually have like beads in them. I have various little knickknacks and stuff that I use. So I use these boxes for everything. But anyway, I hope this was helpful. I could have done this a lot more organized. I hope this edits kind of well. But if you have any questions, feel free and ask. Maybe I'll do a live or something sometime about box making. I thought about doing that. I thought it would be easier to kind of show you guys live to do it, but I don't know. This worked for me okay. I hope I can edit this down though. But anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it. Leave your comments below. Share the video, like it, whatever you want. Feel free. And I'm going to link some other videos below that I found helpful for this stuff. But anyway, thanks for tuning in as always, and love and peace.